All right, last one. Book 12. So, Book 12 covers a lot of adventures. So, Land of the Dead was location number 8, so that means we're going to get location number 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Because location number 14, if you remember, is Calypso's Island, which is where we first met Odysseus. So this whole time, he's been telling all of these adventures to King Alcinous, and kind of giving us an idea of how he ended up on Calypso's Island in the first place. So, location number 9 actually ends up being the same as location number 7. So after Odysseus visits the Land of the Dead, he goes back to Circe's island to get some additional advice from her. He knows what he has to do now. He has to sail through the narrow little strait of water, and then when they land on the island with the cows, don't eat the cows. That's kind of his immediate mission. So, Book 12 starts and says, Odysseus and his crew, missing word there, return to Circe's island, where Circe warns Odysseus of the perils that await him. In the following passage, Odysseus, quoting Circe, is still speaking at Alcinous's court. So it would have been much too easy for this narrow little waterway to be a nice, friendly little narrow waterway. There, of course, have to be some more monsters that Odysseus needs to watch out for. So, this is Circe speaking, Odysseus telling us what Circe said. So Circe says, "Listen with care to this now, and a god will arm your mind. Square in your ship's path are sirens, crying beauty to bewitch men coasting by. Woe to the innocent who hears that sound. He will not see his lady, nor his children enjoy, crowding about him home from sea. The sirens will sing his mind away, on their sweet meadow lulling. There are bones of dead men rotting in a pile beside them, and flayed skins shrivel around the spot. Steer wide, keep well to seaward. Plug your oarsmen's ears with beeswax kneaded soft. None of the rest should hear that song. But if you wish to listen, let the men tie you in the lugger, hand and foot, back to the mast, lashed to the mast, so you may hear those harpies' thrilling voices. Shout as you will, begging to be untied, your crew must only twist more line around you and keep their stroke up till the singers fade." So, location number 10 isn't really a location that Odysseus will stop at, but one that he must go past. So Circe tells him that on his way to the narrow waterway, he is going to run into these monsters called sirens. So normally when we think of a siren, we think of like a police siren, it makes noise, very scary. This particular sound has kind of the opposite effect. So there are these creatures, and Circe refers to them as harpies, which are actually like a half-woman, half-bird monster. And these harpies sing songs to tempt sailors to sail close to their island. So if you hear the song of the sirens, then you are under like a magical spell. Nothing can stop you from sailing towards them, where of course they eat you, because everything eats people in this particular story. So anyways, Circe's advice for Odysseus to deal with the magical song is don't listen to it. So she recommends that he take some beeswax, waxy earplug substance, and put it on his men's ears so that they can't hear the song and they'll be safe. She does give him an option, though. He could do the beeswax thing, but if he wants to be the first man to hear the siren song and live, because he's Odysseus, he likes to be special, then he has the option to have himself tied up to the boat so that he can listen, but he won't be able to jump off the ship or anything. So we'll see when he gets to the sirens if he decides to play it safe or if he is curious and wants to hear the sound of the sirens. So that's going to be location number 10. Now Circe is going to give him a warning about 11 and 12. They're technically two different places, but they're right next to each other. Each one is on one side of the narrow waterway, so she describes them together. So starting at the little italicized line, The next peril lies between two headlands. Circe continues her warning. That is the den of Scylla, where she yaps abominably, a newborn whelp's cry, though she is huge and monstrous. God or man, no one could look on her in joy. Her legs, and there are 12, are like great tentacles, unjointed, and upon her serpent necks are borne 6 heads like nightmares of ferocity, with triple serried rows of fangs and deep gullets of black death. Half her length she sways her heads in air outside her horrid cleft, hunting the sea around that promontory for dolphins, dogfish, or what bigger game thundering amphitrite feeds in thousands, and no ship's company can claim to have passed her without loss and grief. She takes from every ship 1 man for every gullet. The opposite point seems more a tongue of land you touch with a good bow shot at the Narrows. A great wild fig, a shaggy mass of leaves grows on it, and Charybdis lurks below to swallow down the dark sea tide. 3 times from dawn to dusk she spews it up and sucks it down again. 3 times, a whirling maelstrom. If you come upon her, then the god who makes the earth tremble could not save you. No, hug the cliff of Scylla. Take your ship through on a racing stroke. Better to mourn 6 men than lose them all, and the ship too. So, Scylla and Charybdis, location number 11 and location number 12. So Scylla is the first one described, and she is a very typical monster-looking kind of monster. So round line 683 mentions she has 12 legs, 6 heads, and she has a tendency to eat as many men as she has heads, thus 6. So if Odysseus sails too close to that side of the narrow waterway, then he's going to lose 6 men, 1 for each head. But if he sails too close to the other side, there's another problem. Charybdis. So Charybdis is not what you would typically think of as a monster per se, but around line 701 it mentions that Charybdis is a whirling maelstrom, and a maelstrom is a whirlpool. So if you're sailing along in a ship, you typically want to avoid big, nasty, angry whirlpools because, that could kill everyone on the ship. So Circe's advice is, rather than sailing close to the whirlpool, sail close to Scylla. Because even if you lose 6 guys, at least you still have everybody else. So kind of a lesser of 2 evils choice here. Okay, so that was through line 706. And at line 707, Circe gives one last warning, again, about something we have already heard. Then you will coast Thrinacia, the island where Helios's cattle graze, fine herds and flocks of goodly sheep. The herds and flocks are 7, with 50 beasts in each. No lambs are dropped or calves, and these fat cattle never die. Now give those kine a wide berth. Keep your thoughts intent upon your course for home, and hard seafaring brings you all to Ithaca. But if you raid the beeves, I see destruction for ship and crew. So once again, Circe, just like Tiresias, is saying, don't hurt the cows. So Odysseus has received multiple warnings now about not messing with the cows. How does it go so wrong? We'll find out. So that's the warnings. And at this point, Odysseus and his men set sail. So they leave Circe's island and they're headed towards the Sirens. So let's see how the Sirens' adventure goes. The Ithacans set off. Odysseus does not tell his men of Circe's last prophecy, that he may be the only survivor of their long journey. Still speaking to Alcinous's court, Odysseus continues his tale. The crew being now silent before me, I addressed them, sore at heart. Dear friends, more than 1 man or 2 should know those things Circe foresaw for us and shared with me. So let me tell her forecast. Then we die with our eyes open, if we are going to die, or know what death we baffle if we can. Sirens weave a haunting song over the sea we are to shun, she said, and their green shore all sweet with clover. Yet she urged that I alone should listen to their song. Therefore, you are to tie me up, tight as a splint, erect along the mast, lashed to the mast. And if I shout and beg to be untied, take more turns of the rope to muffle me. I rather dwelt on this part of the forecast, while our good ship made time, bound outward down the wind for the strange island of Sirens. Then, all at once, the wind fell, and a calm came over all the sea, as though some power lulled the swell. The crew were on their feet briskly to furl the sail and stow it. Then, each in place, they poised the smooth oar blades and sent the white foam scudding by. I carved a massive cake of beeswax into bits and rolled them in my hands until they softened. No long task, for a burning heat came down from Helios, lord of high noon. Going forward, I carried wax along the line and laid it thick on their ears. They tied me up then, plumb amidships, back to the mast, lashed to the mast, and took themselves again to rowing. Soon, as we came smartly within hailing distance, the 2 Sirens, noting our fast ship off their point, made ready, and they sang. The lovely voices in ardor appealing over the water made me crave to listen, and I tried to say, "Untie me," to the crew, jerking my brows, but they bent steadily to the oars. Then Perimedes got to his feet, he and Eurylochus, and passed more line about to hold me still. So all rowed on, until the Sirens dropped under the sea rim, and their singing dwindled away. My faithful company rested on their oars now, peeling off the wax that I had laid thick on their ears, then set me free. Okay, so Sirens, location number 10. Pretty successful overall. So just as Circe recommended, Odysseus got beeswax for his men's ears, and he ended up making the choice to listen to the song, so he was tied to the ship. So even though he was tempted, he wanted to go towards the Sirens. His men would not untie him, so everybody's safe. Yay! Now you'll notice that when Odysseus said, "Hey, let me tell you what Circe told me," he told them about the Sirens, didn't really mention the narrow strait where 6 people are probably going to die. So you can decide whether that was a good decision for him to not warn his men about that. Would they have been better prepared if they were warned? Would it not make a difference? Would they freak out more if they were warned? You decide. But just so you know, next little bit, the men do not know what is about to happen, but Odysseus does. So at line 763, kind of midline there, but scarcely had that island faded in blue air when I saw smoke and white water, with a sound of waves and tumult, a sound the men heard, and it terrified them. Oars flew from their hands. The blades went knocking wild alongside till the ship long way, with no oar blades to drive her through the water. Well, I walked up and down from bow to stern, trying to put heart into them, standing over every oarsman, saying gently, "Friends, have we never been in danger before this? More fearsome is it now than when the Cyclops penned us in his cave? What power he had! Did I not keep my nerve and use my wits to find a way out for us? Now I say, by hook or crook, this peril too shall be something we remember. Heads up, lads, we must obey the orders as I give them. Get the oar shafts in your hands and lie back hard on your benches. Hit these breaking seas. Zeus, help us pull away before we founder. You at the tiller, listen and take in all that I say. The rudders are your duty. Keep her out of the combers and the smoke. Steer for that headland. Watch your drift, or we fetch up in the smother and you drown us." That was all, and it brought them round to action. But as I sent them on towards Scylla, I told them nothing, as they could do nothing. They would have dropped their oars again, in panic, to roll for cover under the decking. Circe's bidding against arms had slipped my mind, so I tied on my cuirass and took up 2 heavy spears, then made my way along to the foredeck, thinking to see her first from there, the monster of the gray rock, harboring torment for my friends. Okay, so they're sailing towards Scylla and Charybdis, and things start getting a little rough, start getting a little choppy. They are coming up near a whirlpool, after all. So Odysseus' men, not realizing this was about to happen, kind of freak out. Odysseus has to, try and be a good leader and be like, "Guys, pull yourself together. Come on, let's row through this. We're going to be fine." Of course, they're not all going to be fine. But, as he said, he doesn't want to tell them that because he's worried they'll freak out even more. I mean, if they're freaking out when the water's getting a little bit rough, then how much would they freak out when they hear that a 6-headed monster is going to eat 6 of them? So, anyways, Odysseus is not totally ignoring this prediction, though. So, as they go towards, where is it? As they go towards Scylla and Charybdis, he mentions that he tied on his cuirass, like his armor, and took up 2 heavy spears and then went to the front of the ship. So he's thinking to himself, well, 6-headed monster is coming up, probably not too much I can do, but maybe I can kill it. So he is going to try something. The question is whether it will be successful. So at line 799, halfway through, I strained my eyes upon that cliffside veiled in cloud, but nowhere could I catch sight of her. And all this time, in travail, sobbing, gaining on the current, we rowed into the strait, Scylla to port, and on our starboard beam, Charybdis, dire gorge of the salt sea tide. By heaven, when she vomited, all the sea was like a cauldron seething over intense fire when the mixture suddenly heaves and rises. The shot spume soared to the landside heights and fell like rain. But when she swallowed the sea water down, we saw the funnel of the maelstrom, heard the rock bellowing all around, and dark sand raged on the bottom far below. My men, all blanched against the gloom, our eyes were fixed upon that yawning mouth in fear of being devoured. Then Scylla made her strike, whisking 6 of my best men from the ship. I happened to glance aft at ship and oarsmen and caught sight of their arms and legs dangling high overhead. Voices came down to me in anguish, calling my name for the last time. A man surf casting on a point of rock for bass or mackerel, whipping his long rod to drop the sinker and the bait far out, will hook a fish and rip it from the surface to dangle, wriggling through the air. So these were borne aloft in spasms toward the cliff. She ate them as they shrieked there in her den in the dire grapple, reaching still for me, and deathly pity ran me through at that sight, far the worst I ever suffered questing the passes of the strange sea. We rowed on. The rocks were now behind. Charybdis, too, and Scylla dropped astern. Then we were coasting the noble island of the god, where grazed those cattle with wide brows, and bounteous flocks of Helios, lord of noon, who rides high heaven. From the black ship, far still at sea, I heard the lowing of the cattle, winding home and sheep bleating, and heard, too, in my heart the words of blind Tiresias of Thebes and Circe of Aea. Both forbade me, the island of the world's delight, the sun. Okay, so Scylla and Charybdis went about as expected. Odysseus was not able to kill Scylla or even wound her. He and his men were so distracted by the whirlpool that was on the right side of their ship that they didn't even realize when Scylla made her strike. So she snatched 6 of Odysseus's men and ripped them off of the ship. And there's an epic simile, so long extended comparison, describing the way that Scylla snatches these men from the ship. So at line 822, it talks about how, if you've ever been fishing before, when you catch a fish, you rip it from the water and the fish dangles wriggling in the air. So that's the same way that Scylla, when she snatched those men, ripped them from the ship, and their little arms and legs were dangling in the air, and they were like, "Help me, Odysseus!" And unfortunately, he couldn't do anything. So that was kind of a bummer, but they've made it through the strait. They survived the whirlpool, mostly survived Scylla, and now they're about to go to the island of the cows. So this is location number 13, the only location on Odysseus' journey that we haven't discussed, aside from him maybe getting home. And we already kind of know what's going to happen here. Odysseus has been warned by Tiresias and by Circe, don't eat the cows. So, why do his men eat the cows? So, starting at the italicized section, just before line 844, Odysseus urges his exhausted crew to bypass Thrinacia, the island of the sun god Helios, so he doesn't even want to stop there. When the men insist on landing, Odysseus makes them swear not to touch the god's cattle. Odysseus is still speaking to Alcinous's court. In the small hours of the 3rd watch, when stars that shone out in the first dusk of evening had gone down to their setting, a giant wind blew from heaven, and clouds driven by Zeus shrouded land and sea in a night of storm. So, just as dawn with fingertips of rose touched the windy world, we dragged our ship to cover in a grotto, a sea cave, where nymphs had chairs of rock and sanded floors. I mustered all the crew and said, "Old shipmates, our stores are in the ship's hold, food and drink. The cattle here are not for our provision, or we pay dearly for it. Fierce the god is who cherishes these heifers and these sheep, Helios, and no man avoids his eye." To this my fighters nodded, yes. But now we had a month of onshore gales, blowing day in, day out, south winds or south by east. As long as bread and good red wine remained to keep the men up and appease their craving, they would not touch the cattle. But in the end, when all the barley in the ship was gone, hunger drove them to scour the wild shore with angling hooks for fishes and seafowl, whatever fell into their hands, and lean days wore their bellies thin. The storms continued. So one day I withdrew to the interior to pray the gods in solitude, for hope that one might show me some way of salvation. Slipping away, I struck across the island to a sheltered spot out of the driving gale. I washed my hands there and made supplication to the gods who own Olympus, all the gods, but they, for answer, only closed my eyes under slow drops of sleep. So, Odysseus and his men stop on the island. Everyone agrees they're not going to mess with the cows, but unfortunately, they're not able to leave for a month because of storms. A whole month of storms. That's pretty bad luck right there. So after, they've been there a while and all the food is gone and everyone's getting really hungry, Odysseus is like, we have got to do something. We have got to get out of here. So he goes to pray to the gods. But unfortunately, while he's praying, eyes closed and everything, he ends up taking a little nappy instead. So when Odysseus is asleep, all his men are together, very hungry, just thinking about what might help them out. So at line 878, while Odysseus is off taking a little nap, now on the shore, Eurylochus made his insidious plea. "Comrades," he said, "you've gone through everything. Listen to what I say. All deaths are hateful to us, mortal wretches, but famine is the most pitiful, the worst end that a man can come to. Will you fight it? Come, we'll cut out the noblest of these cattle for sacrifice to the gods who own the sky. And once at home in the old country of Ithaca, if ever that day comes, we'll build a costly temple and adorn it with every beauty for the Lord of Noon. But if he flares up over his heifers lost, wishing our ship destroyed, and if the gods make cause with him, why then I say, better open your lungs to a big sea once for all than waste to skin and bones on a lonely island." Thus Eurylochus, and they murmured, aye, trooping away at once to round up heifers. Now that day, tranquil cattle with broad brows were grazing near, and soon the men drew up around their chosen beasts in ceremony. They plucked the leaves that shone on a tall oak, having no barley meal, to strew the victims, performed the prayers and ritual, knifed the kine, and flayed each carcass, cutting thigh bones free to wrap in double folds of fat. These offerings, with strips of meat, were laid upon the fire. Then, as they had no wine, they made libation with clear spring water, broiling the entrails first, and when the bones were burnt and tripes shared, they spitted the carved meat. Just then, my slumber left me in a rush. My eyes opened, and I went down the seaward path. No sooner had I caught sight of our black hole than savory odors of burnt fat eddied around me. Grief took hold of me, and I cried aloud, "O Father Zeus, and gods in bliss forever, you made me sleep away this day of mischief. O cruel drowsing in the evil hour, here they sat, and a great work they contrived." So, Odysseus' men killed the cows. Now, the logic behind this, for Eurylochus, who was the one who was like, guys, come on, let's eat the cows, is how would you like to die? They know that if they kill the cows, it's very probable that they will be killed. But since they've been stuck on the island for a month without a whole lot of food, it's possible they might die even if they don't kill the cows. So Eurylochus' philosophy is, well, if I have to die, I would rather drown, if we're killed at sea or something like that, I would rather drown than starve. So think to yourself, if you had that choice, drowning, starving, which one would you choose? Would you be a cow killer too? Who knows? Now, Odysseus, once he wakes up from his nap and goes down the trail and smells the dead cows, is like, oh no! But Odysseus does not eat the cows. So, notice in their punishment how their punishment differs. So at line 919, Lampetia, who is Helios's daughter, she's also a goddess, she's the one who sounds the alarm. So Lampetia, in her long gown meanwhile, had borne swift word to the overlord of noon, they have killed your kind. And the Lord Helios burst into angry speech amid the immortals. O Father Zeus, and gods in bliss forever, punish Odysseus' men. So overweening, now they have killed my peaceful kine, my joy at morning when I climbed the sky of stars, and evening when I bore westward from heaven. Restitution or penalty they shall pay, and pay in full. Or I go down forever to light the dead men in the underworld. When Odysseus and his men set sail again, they are punished with death. A thunderbolt from Zeus destroys their boat, and all the men drown. Only Odysseus survives. Exhausted and nearly drowned, he makes his way to Calypso's island, where we met him originally in Book 5. Odysseus has brought us up to date. He can now rest and enjoy the comforts of Alcinous's court, but not for long. Ahead lies his most difficult task, reclaiming his own kingdom. All right, so since Odysseus did not eat the cows, he was the only one to survive when Zeus punished them. So, thunderbolt from the sky destroyed the boat. Everybody drowned except Odysseus. So he washed up on Calypso's island, which is where we first met him. So now we have the story full circle. We met him on Calypso's island. He went to the Phaeacians. Hopefully he'll go home from here. And now he's told us about all the events that led him to end up on Calypso's island in the first place. So, the only thing he has left to do at this point is hopefully hitch a ride home with the Phaeacians, and, kill all those guys who were trying to get with his wife. The end.